And my job is to come up with a topic that no one's ever thought of. And I think this week I did. I mean, everything I'm saying is based on Medrashim and Rashi, so it's not exactly no one, but you know what I'm saying. Here's my topic. Okay, today's Parshas Lech Lecha. There's a lot, 126 psukim. Last week we had 154, which is even more. But Lech Lecha is a packed parsha. It's a story of Avraham Avinu. It's the first half of his life. It's a nice parsha. It's a very good parsha. It says in Hayom Yom, it's Afrei Lechavach. Lech Lecha is Afrei Lechavach. A whole week you live with Avraham Avinu. But there's many stories. All of us understand that if a story is written in the Chumash, it's more than just a story. In other words, if the Torah was telling us the life and time of Avraham Avinu, it wouldn't be two parshas, it would be two volumes. Any person who lives a full life has hundreds of events, including scores of significant events. So, any episode which is actually recorded in the Torah about Avraham Avinu is of great significance, great importance. And sometimes you have little details of a story, or to be precise, what seems like a little nuance of a story that are of very little significance, really. And you scratch your head and say, if every word in Torah is precise and exact and meaningful and useful, why is this story written in so many details? And there's more than one such story in our Parsha, but one of them is the story of Hagar. Hagar, as you know, was a princess. Her father was a king in Egypt. And she served as a maid in Avraham's home. Sara comes to Avraham. It's not even Avraham's idea. Sara comes to Avraham with the proposal. Ulai ibanu mimena. Right? Is that what it says in Chumash? We have a Chumash. Right? Ulai ibanu mimena. What happens? Avraham lives in Eretz Yisrael for 10 years. So of course, Chazal say that for 10 years he was hoping he's going to have children. But the years until he came to Eretz Yisrael, he didn't even think as were years of his marriage. I mean, we don't know how old Avraham and Sara were when they got married, but they may have been very young. They were an uncle and a niece. Sara was Haran's daughter, so Sara was Avraham's niece, and there was 10 years between them. And they may have got married when they were teenagers. Who knows? But until Avraham is 75, the fact that he hasn't had children has no bearing on him, because Avraham is a Navi somehow, he's a prophet, and he knows that what matters is when it comes to Eretz Yisrael. But then he lives in Eretz Yisrael for 10 years. Now he's 86 years old. And now he starts to panic. Sara comes up with this. Sara comes up with the idea. Take Hagar. She's my maid servant. They brought her back from Mitzrayim when they went to Mitzrayim in the beginning of this week's Parsha. And if she'll have children, they'll carry my name. Right? That's what happens when you own slaves. And of course, you and I cannot relate to that phenomena at all. We can't even imagine such a thing. A slave is a human being, owned by a human being the way you own chickens and pet goldfish. Literally. And Sarah says to Avraham, I'm going to give you my maidservant Hagar. She comes from good stock. She's a daughter. She's a princess. She comes from royalty. And if she'll have children, they'll be mine. And Avraham says, okay, that's what you want? Fine. Avraham goes along with her. And Hagar gets pregnant. And Hagar gets cocky. She gets comfortable. Rashi says, she says to Sarah, you're full of baloney. You act like you're a tzadekis. I became pregnant from Avraham Avinu in the first try. You live in all of these years. Mistama, you're not toichik kabare. Maybe you're putting on a show that you're this righteous woman. But if you were truly righteous, you would have conceived long ago. And Sarah's devastated. It was her idea. She wanted to have children, so she suggested to Avraham Avinu that he should take Hagar. He took her. Hagar becomes pregnant right away. And Hagar starts to torment Sarah, and Sarah torments her back. Sarah begins to make Hagar's life miserable. It was unofficial, but Sarah was the boss, was the Gevira. And Sarah was the Shivcha. She put her to work from morning till Hagar was the Shivcha.
How did Hagar become a servant? She's
the daughter, because when Avraham went to Mitzrayim, and Pare saw the great miracles, so he had one of his children join Avraham Avinu's family. Midachtzach. I didn't look this up this evening, but I think it says in Midrash. So Sarah starts to be pashat cruel. Sara starts to treat Hagar the way in the Megillah Esther Vashti treated the Jewish girls. She just made her work day and night. She was miserable to her. And Hagar understood what was going on, that because she had opened the big fat mouth and she had behaved arrogantly and she forgot who she was, she forgot her place in the society, she was being badgered and bullied, and she ran away. And there's the strangest stories. She's running away. She has no place to go, but she can't stay. She can't live in that house. It's impossible. And she meets a Malach. And Rashi says she met 4 Malach, one after the other. The Radak says she met 3 Malach. And there's an opinion in the Gemara, the Medrash, that says she met 5 Malach. In other words, one after the next she meets a Malach. Each Malach tells her something else. The first Malach tells her who she is. Vayimtza Malach Hashem al ein hamayim al hamidbar b'derech shur. And he says, Hagar shifcha Sara, you're a slave, what are you doing out and about? He identifies her as a shifcha, as a slave. And the next Malach tells her, go back. Your mistress is being miserable. You're better off suffering in that house than having the plenty in another house. Go back. The third Malach tells you you're going to have a large family. Many children. And the fourth Malach tells you you're going to have a son who's worthy to be mentioned by name in the Torah. And his name is Yishmael. So of course Rashi points out that we all know the story of Manoach. Not the story of Manoach. The Shimshon Agiba's parents. It's a very funny story. You know why it's a funny story? Because we don't know the name of Shimshon Agiba's mother. She's called in the Tanakh Eshes Manoach, Manoach's wife. But the Chazal say she was the Tzadekis and she was the Braino, who was a Pashta Yid. But for some reason his name, Manoach, is mentioned. And his wife, who was the reason that he was Zeichet to be the parent of Shimshon Agiba, we don't know her name. At least not from the Psukim. So the Eshes Manoach, what happens is, the Malach comes to Eshes Manoach. Manoach's not around. So Manoach comes home, and Eshes Manoach comes. You know, a guy came here, and he looked like a Malach, and he told us that we're going to have a baby. And he further told me that I shouldn't drink wine, and I should be very careful because my son is going to be a Nazir. So Eshes Manoach says to his wife, why did he come to you? He should have come to me. I'm the man of the house. She said, I don't know. So they davened. So the Malach should come again. The Malach comes the second time, invited to Eshes Manoach. So she says, wait, I got to call my husband. She runs and she calls her husband. Her husband comes out and he tells the two of them the same thing again. Don't drink any wine and don't eat any grapes. Don't become Tamal Ameisim and so on. And they want to feed the guy. They offer him a meal. And he touches the meal and the entire meal catches fire and the fire is going up to heaven. He climbs onto the fire and he rises up to the heavens. And they watched us. So the Pasuk says, they said, we're going to die. We saw a Malach. The guy climbed up to heaven on the fire. Woo. Don't try that at home. It doesn't work so good. And they said, we're going to die. So I forgot if he said or she said, if the Eibishter wanted us to die, he wouldn't have showed us all of these miracles. And of course, then they have Shimshon Agibet, and we know the rest of that story. So the Medrashim say, Manoach and his wife see one Malach. And they're afraid they're going to die. Hagar sees 4 Malachim in 15 minutes. One Malach comes, tells her a few words, and goes away. Another Malach comes, tells her and goes away. A third Malach comes, tells her a few words, and goes away. A fourth Malach comes, tells her a few words, and goes away. And according to the Medrash, according to one opinion, a fifth Malach comes, tells her a few words, and goes away. Rashi points out how special it must have been to live in the house of the others. In the house of Avraham, Yitzchak, Yankov, Sara, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, you were used to strange guests. Malachim came and went all the time. The servants, the shepherds, the schleppers, everybody knew that in this house, Chavra show up that come from another world. She was used to it. She'd seen Malachim so many times. She was a shifcha. She was a maidservant. She was a simple woman. But in Avram's house, she was so accustomed to Kedusha and Tahara, Malachim came and went like you come and go from a cup of coffee over here. So she was completely comfortable seeing a Malach after a Malach after a Malach after a Malach. But here's the question. Why do you have to have 4 Malachim or 5 Malachim to basically have one conversation? I'm going to read the conversation with you, and you tell me why you need 5 Malachim. So it's Kapitel Te Zayin, It starts Pasuk Zayin. I'm not starting from the beginning of the story. I'm starting from the part of the story where Hagar's run away, and she's sitting by a well. There's water. There's no food, but at least there's water. She's not going to die from thirst. She'll die from hunger. She can't stay in the house. Sara is absolutely abusing her. And the Pasuk says like this. I'm reading and translating. Vayimtza Malach Hashem, an angel of God finds her, Al Ein Amayim, over the well of water, and the word Ein, which means a well, is very important. Bamidbar, in the desert. Al Ha'ayin, on the well, B'derech Shur, on a road that leads to Shur, or the road that leads from Shur. Vayomer, and the Malach tells her, Hagar Shivcha Sara. The first thing he tells her is, you're a slave. There's the Shalom Aleichem. Hagar Shivcha Sara, you're a big macher, you ran away, you should know you still belong to your mistress. He identifies her by her tag. Hagar Shivcha Sara, you are Hagar, the maidservant of Sara. Where are you going from? Where do you think you're gonna? Where you coming from? Where do you think you're going? So she tells him the truth. I'm running away from my mistress. I got pregnant by my master with her permission, and she's really abusing me. I can't live in the house. The angel of God says to her, go back to your mistress. Subdue yourself to her. In other words, she's bullying you today, but she's a good woman. You'll have a better life under her than in other places. Go back. Then it says, the angel of God says to her, Harba Arba Ezarach. The Malach tells her. And in this case, the Malach is speaking like as if he's God. Harba Arba Ezarach. I'm going to give you many children. You know how many children you're going to have? Allah yourself, and no one's going to be able to know the number of children you have. There's going to be so many kids. Rabbi say. Then it says, Vayomer lo Malach Hashem, and then the Malach tells her, Hina Chadet, you're going to get pregnant again. And of course, it actually learns from this that she lost her first pregnancy, and that's why he doesn't get pregnant the second time. Hagar, she lost her initial pregnancy.
Did she having a lot of kids? You just don't know about them?
Well, she's the father and mother of Ishmael. It's a lot of kids, yeah. Hina Chadet, you're going to get pregnant. V'yaladet ben, you're going to have one son. V'karas shmei Yishmael, you should call him by the name Yishmael, which means Ki shama Hashem ha'onech, the Eibush has heard your suffering. And then he describes what kind of kid she's going to have, the Nachas. V'hu yiyeh pera adam, he's going to be a wild man. Yadei b'koil, he's going to have his hand in everybody else's business. V'yad kol boy, everybody's going to have their hands in his business. V'apnei karoch of Yishkan, he's going to rest amongst his brothers. So Rashi says, a lot of the Mepharshim say, Yishmael was an only son from Hagar. But Hagar also was called Keturah, and she was the mother of a whole bunch of other kids. So B'yad of Apnei Kol Echav Yishkan means Hagar Hagar gets pregnant, she has Yishmael, and then Sara kicks her out a second time. And she's out of the house for years. She's out of the house for years, close to 40 years. When Sara passes away, Yitzchak goes to find her. And he finds that she has not been with any man since she left Abraham's house. Her name was Keturah because she put a string across her. I lived with a tzaddik, I'm not marrying any other man. Yitzchak, Sara's son, brings her back to Avraham Avinu in next week's Parsha, and they have a bunch of kids. So Pnei Kol Echav Yishkan means Yishmael's brothers, really from Hagar, but they were 30, 40, 50 years younger than he was. This is the story. Then the rest of it is how whatever. That's what I'm telling you. So I read you 5 or 6 psukim. It's basically a conversation. A Malach finds her and tells her that she's a slave and asks her why she's run away. Tells her to go back home. Promises her many children. Promises her one child named Yishmael. And tells her what kind of chaveman he's going to be. He's going to be a pet adam. So how do you get the 4 or 5 malach? How do you get the 4 or 5 malach?
How's there different opinions on Malach?
Oh, how did the opinions of Malach? So the 2 opinions in the Medrash. One opinion says that every time it says the word Malach, it means a different one. So in Pasuk Zayin it says Vayimtza Malach. In Pasuk Ches it just says Vayomer. But in Pasuk Tes it says Vayomer la Malach. In Pasuk Yud it says Vayomer la Malach. And in Pasuk Rav it says Vayomer la Malach. So the first opinion says every time it says Malach, it's another one. And the second opinion says every time it says Vayomer, it's a Malach. That's how you have 5 instead of 4. Because the first time it says Vayomer LaMalach in Pasuk Zayin, and then in Pasuk Ches it says Vayomer. So that's how the argument goes. She either saw 4 or 5 different malachim. Now, can you please tell me the point? Of course, the simple point is to show how incredibly casual Hagar was with malachim. She lived in Avraham's house for many years, or for a while. She was so accustomed to seeing angels to be like you seeing a guy who's, I don't know, from Chassidische Yid. She saw malachim all the time. But this conversation, why does it take 4 or 5 malachim? This is my question, and this is the conversation we're going to be having with the time that we have. And I need to preface by saying, I'm building my class around Medrashim, around Rashi. There's a little Venezes, there's a little Ramban, but I'm really making this up. In other words, the details I found in the Mefarshim, but the thrust of what I'm going to say, the Nukuda of tonight's class, is based on what I saw in other places, but I didn't see it here. Okay, there's a rule which you can learn next week in the beginning of next week's parak. There's a very big difference between a malach and a person. Malachim are holy, they're close to God, and a whole bunch of good stuff, but a malach does not have a core. A malach is like a computer. Whatever you has no core. There's no I to a malach. A malach doesn't have an essence. Malachim are brilliant, and they're pure, and they're holy, and they're holy, praising God, whatever you want. But malachim do only what you're programmed to do. There's no I. There's no personal will. And therefore there's a rule about malachim. Because a malach does not have an essence, you can program him to do one thing and that's it. When Avraham meets the malachim next week, why do you have to have 3 malachim? Why is not one good enough? One has to heal Avraham, one has to tell Sarah that she's going to have a baby, and one has to turn over Sodom. You need 3 malachim, one is not enough. Why? Ein malach echad oise bein shlichiyos. One angel cannot do 2 missions, because malachim are their mission. This is what the Rashi says in Chumash in Parshas Vayishlach, and it's repeated again in Parshas Shoftim by the story of Manoach. Yaakov Avinu meets the malach of Esav and tells him, what's your name? So if you know Chumash, you answer him like an old Teidanik. Yeah? Yaakov Avinu fights with this guy a whole night, and in the morning they come to some kind of stalemate, and he tells him, what's your name? So he answers him, what's your business? I get an old Teidanik, one of those old Schwarzer caps. What's your business? And by Eishes V'Noach, they ask you, what's your name? None of your business. So Rashi says, why couldn't he tell him? And the answer, the Malach doesn't have a name. Because a name describes a personality, an essence. Malachim have a mission.
Isn't the mission the name?
Today, so it changes from mission to mission. So when you say to the Malach, what's your name? The Malach says, what's it going to help you? Tomorrow it's going to be different. I'm not a human being. A human being in his life does thousands of things under the same name. Because the human being has a core and an essence from which radiate a variety of different behaviors. I don't have a core. Today my name is Shmedel. Tomorrow my name is Bedel. The next name is Chaim. So me telling you my name is not helpful to you because tomorrow it's going to change. So because a Malach does not have an essence. Which means, Rabbi, I need you to put your hands down. If the clock will allow, I will answer you, but I need to teach what I have to teach. I apologize. You know why 4 or 5 Malachim visit Hagar? Because it's 4 or 5 different missions. This is the class. It's not one conversation. It looks like one conversation. Hagar runs away from Sara Imenu, and a Malach meets her and talks to her and makes her feel good and encourages her to go back and tells her it's worth it and promises her the Arabs, the Arab Rab. She promises her, wow. So on the surface, it's a simple story. Hagar runs away, a Malach meets her, but if you examine the conversation that the Malach has with Hagar, you understand it may have happened in a few minutes, but it's 4 different conversations. And because there's 4 different conversations, this is why you have 4 Malachim. And this is what I want to develop. What is each Malach saying that he cannot, that he has to go back to Hashem, and another Malach has to come on a second mission? 4 times. 4 different Malach. That's not what it says in the Chazal. Hashem sends a Malach to Hagar and says, do this. The Malach goes to Hagar and does this and says, okay, I'm done. Hashem says, no, go to Hagar and do this. Because each of the 4, in parenthesis, or 5 missions are distinct. They're so different that it can't be the same Malach doing more than shlichus. And this is what I want to sort of develop. What was it? They may have happened one after the other. How much time it took is not the point. The point is they were doing very, very different things. And you have to appreciate what they were doing to appreciate the fact that they were doing different missions, to appreciate the fact that there needs to be different malach. The first malach meets her by a well. And there's a medrash. It says, El Ein Hamayim. And the well says as follows. This is a fascinating medrash. The medrash says as follows. A well is like water. It flows. Ein means an eye, and Ein means a well. So the medrash says, the eye of a person is like a well. It flows. Until there's no more water. When a well runs out of water, it's useless. When a human being runs out of tears, El Ein Hamayim, when a human being runs out of tears, like they say people after the Holocaust, you can't do anything with them. You know the story? I heard the story directly from the video, from Rabbi Lau. Rabbi Lau was 9 years old when the Americans came to liberate Auschwitz. And he sees an American chaplain, a Jewish guy, and he's hiding behind some brush. And this chaplain says to Rabbi Lau, "What's your name?" "My name is Cyrillic." "How old are you?" And he says, "I'm older than you." So the chaplain says, "What do you mean you're older than me? You're a little boy, I'm a man." He says, "Nah, you still know how to cry. I don't cry anymore." Rabbi Lau would tell that story about himself. You still know how to cry. I don't cry anymore. So the Medrash says Hashem sends a Malach to Hagar and says, you need to meet her while she's still able to cry. That's titled El Ein Hamayim. It's a beautiful Medrash. El Ein Hamayim, on the fountain of water. Ein means the eye. If we let a Hagar cry long enough, it's obviously psychological. She'll cry till she can't cry anymore. And once she cries, until she cannot cry anymore, psychologically she can't be healed. And psychologically she's not going to be able to be what she needs to be, for better or for worse. To be the mother of Yishmael, and then later all the rest of the children, which is written in the next week's, whatever, I forgot the names. In Parshas Vayeda, the whole bunch of kids Avraham has. So the first Malach goes there for 2 reasons. Catch Hagar before she's so broken that she's not fixable. That's his mission. Hashem sends a Malach, find her by the well while there's still tears in her ducts. I think it's a beautiful pshat. It's a medrash. It's a seichel tei. It's a good medrash. All medrashim are good. So his mission is to simply comfort Hagar. Hagar's devastated. She grew up in a palace. Her father made her a slave to this tzaddik. The tzaddik's wife is abusing her. She's devastated. She runs away. She's crying hysterically. Hashem says, Malach, your job is to keep her crying. Because as long as she cries, she can heal. And that's the mission of the first Malach. So the first Malach's mission is simply to get to Hagar when she's still in a state that she can be rehabilitated. And then he tells her, you are a slave. And you're a slave to a pretty good woman. You should really go back. You should really go back. So there's a machlokes. One opinion says that's the same mission. That the same Malach who came to catch her while she's still crying, that she can still be rehabilitated, there's enough person left that she can be a mother, says to her, listen, I'm here to comfort you. I'm on your team. The Eibishter sent me, Al Ein Hamayim. Hashem sent me to you that I should make you feel like a human being. I'm telling you, it's in your best interest. Shuv v'yel gevirtech. V'es'ani tachas. Right now she's being difficult. But you've known her for a long time. You're better off in that house than someplace else. So according to one of the Medrashim, it's the same mission. One of the days in the Medrash, it's the same mission. According to another day in Medrash, it's a different Malach. If you hold, like the other day in the Medrash, that it's a separate Malach, you need to understand the tone very differently. If one Malach comes to Hagar and his primary mission is to catch her while she's still able to cry, and part of what he says to her is go back home, so the tone, the trop of that going back home was very gentle. He's speaking to her to make her feel like a person. And he says, Hagar, I know it's hard right now. You made a mistake, you opened up your big mouth, you got pregnant and you boasted, so you're getting badgered and bullied. But it'll pass. Go back. But according to the other opinion in the Medrash, because it says the second time by Yoimer, even though it doesn't say Malach, so this Malach, the Malach who made her feel good goes away, and a second Malach comes. And the second Malach says to her, excuse me, you're a slave. You have an owner, go back. In other words, the tone is different. According to the Medrash that holds that it's two different Malachim, and that Hagar saw 5 Malachim, but not 4 Malachim, the second Malach is saying to Hagar, your Sarah's property, go back. So the second Malach is not necessarily speaking so gently, he's speaking rather forcefully. You're not going to be able to get away. Someone's going to bring you back. So go back on your own. And it's said with a tougher voice. So you have machlokes, whether the Malach who comforts Sarah is the same Malach who's telling her to go back, in which case he's telling her to go back gently, or there's two different Malachim. One Malach comforts her, and the other Malach says, go back. And what's interesting, the Chazal point out, that he calls her a maidservant, and she doesn't deny it. Hagar shivcha Sara. So she right away says, Mipnei Sara gevir teneiche berachas. She doesn't say, I don't have a master anymore. She admits. She admits. The Malach says to her, you're a maid. And she says, yes, I am. But I can't handle it right now. And he tells her to go back. That's the difference between the two shittas of the Medrash, whether there's 4 Malachim or there's 5 Malachim. So those are the first two. Guys, I'll let you ask questions when I'm finished. I need to go through this, and then I'll let you talk if the clock will allow. Then there's a third Malach or a second Malach. I mixed up 2 Malachim. The guy in the middle simply identifies her as a slave. That's all he does. He identifies her as a slave. The second or the third Malach tells her, go back. The second or the third Malach goes back. So I have to sort of refine what I said before. One Malach comforts her and identifies her as a slave, or one Malach comforts her, the second Malach identifies as a slave. The next Malach says to her, and this is the second Malach of the 4, go back. Now, we today, you and I, in America, correctly abhor the notion of slavery. You don't need me to tell you, right? Because of the history of slavery, especially in America, there is a correct presumption that owning slaves is extremely cruel. The managing of slaves is terrible, and all the rest. In that world, people had slaves. Now, you can scratch your head and ask the question, does that make Avraham Avinu a bad person because he owned slaves? Or will you say, well, everybody else owned slaves, he owed slaves also. And then you can give the argument, so, if everybody else is a Rasha, you'll be a Rasha too. It gets very tricky.
Yeah, but didn't he treat them like people?
Perhaps, I'm sure he treated them better than like people. Perhaps. In other words, the question of slavery is an existential question. People today will say, anybody who owns slaves ever is automatically presumed to be cruel. And it's very presumptuous. It's not so simple. The Torah is fine. The Torah is fine. The Torah doesn't say you should own slaves. The Torah says you may own slaves. You don't have to dafka own slaves. But Avraham owned slaves. And we'll talk about the morality of slavery at a different time. One thing is certain, you could assume that if Avraham owned slaves, he treated them incredibly well. But to speak from a yeshivish, a language, malachic perspective, that he owned them. So this Malach, that is either Malach 2 or 3, says to Hagar, Shuvi el gevirtech v'sani tachas yodeh, go back to your mistress and submit yourself to her, because you're her property. If you want to understand the unique nature of this shlichus says to Hagar, Hagar, you're right. she's abusing you, you have every right to run away and everything like that. But this is the way of the world. When someone is a slave and they have a master, if you want to get away from that master, there's ways of doing it. But running away is not the way. Legally, he owns you, and legally you have to go back. And he says to her, you'll have to return. So in my mind, the second shliach, the second malach, or the third malach, depending on how you break it down, is coming to Hagar with a very technical, it's a legal argument, it's a practical argument. You know, running away is not going to help. Someone is going to find you and return you. Go back. This is the situation of the world at the time. So is this malach being kind to her? Is this malach being cruel to her? I don't think this malach is being either kind or cruel. This malach is being very pragmatic. So his message to Hagar is, running away is a waste. Running away is not going to work. It's not like you have a job and you quit in the middle of the day. That's not your situation. The halach is a poil is machse b'chatzis machse hayoim, right? A worker can quit in the middle of the day and you can eat your heart out, but that's for another reason. But a slave, he says to her, your escape is temporary. It's not going to work. Go back. So the second malach is speaking to Hagar a different language. It's not a language of empathy, and I would argue it's not a language of toughness either. It's pashut legal. The second malach's mission is, he says to Hagar, listen, I'm a lawyer, and you don't stand a chance in a court of law. Go back. So why do you need a different malach? Because it's a different mission. The first malach is hard. The first malach is gentle and tender. And then if there's a second malach, the second malach is cruel. This malach is neither tender nor cruel. This malach simply speaks to her legalese. So you need a different malach, because this malach is doing an entirely different type of thing. She meets one malach who's kind to her, a second malach who's tougher to her, and a third malach who's reasoning with her. You're in trouble. You want help. I get it. But this is not the way to get it. This is not going to work. You're a slave. Go home. And the malach goes away. So why do you have to have a second malach? Because the second malach is not giving her another part of the shlichus. The second malach has a different character, has a different tone, a different trop. He's speaking in a different language. And that's why you need a different malach for each part of the shlichus. And this, I think, is the subtlety, the nuance of this story. So the second malach goes away. So one malach made her feel good. Let's say a second malach was kind of mean to her. A third malach was just reasonable to her. And then a fourth malach shows up. Either a third or fourth, depending on how you count. And this malach is giving her incentive. He says to her, Hagar, life's hard right now, right? You ran away. Go back. You are going to have so many children, no one is going to be able to count them. Meaning, he tells to her, in the distant future, you're not even going to be around to see it, way after you're dead, so many fruit are going to come from you because you lived in Avraham's house, it's worth it. So this Malach is saying to Hagar, I understand that now it's hard and it may remain this way. But if you go back into Avraham's house, this Malach says, your motivation to go back home, besides for the reasons that we articulated until now, is because later, after you're gone, generations in the future, you will bear so many fruits, you can have so many children from living in that house, that it'll justify whatever inconvenience, whatever difficulty, whatever hardships you're encountering in Avraham Avinu's house. So it's a new malach. Weiter, another tone. The malach isn't just saying other words to her. The malach is speaking differently. So Hagar, you want to grease this deal? You want to make it a little bit easier to manage? I'm going to make it easier to manage by telling you what's going to happen in the future. From living in Avraham and Sara's house, you're going to be blessed with an enormous number of children. And I just want to say this. When the Malach promises Hagar a lot of children, he doesn't promise her that her children are going to be rocket scientists or musicians or artists or doctors. A lot of people. They can be simple people, but many. You know how many? That they cannot be counted. So there's 2 points here. Point number one. The Eibishter gave human beings the mitzvah of pru, revu, umilu, as aretz v'kavshua. The Eibishter gave us the mitzvah to fill the earth with life, to fill the earth with human beings. And by the way, I want to say this, I don't know if it's true, but I believe it's true. You could make a legitimate argument that there are more human beings alive today than Yidden and Goyim, lahavdil, than have ever existed on earth at one time. Some people will say to you that in all history, we're up to 7 or 8 billion people. The numbers are staggering. And if you hold, and the Rebbe suggests that he holds this, that Goyim have a mitzvah pru'avu, we're doing a good job. If the Eibishter wants a lot of human babies, we're doing a good job. So Hashem says, the Malach says to Hagar, you're going to have an incredible number of children. So you're fulfilling a mitzvah. This is number one. And number two, the Chazal say, B'rei v'am hadas melech. Kings have many subjects, but they don't necessarily have to be particularly bright. Faket, if your subjects are too smart, it's hard to be their king. The king is a subject of a simple people. So the Malach is predicting to Hagar, she'll have many, many, many children. And the Eibush, that she's fulfilling a mitzvah. And the Eibush is going to be their king. This is just another way of looking at it. All of your many children are going to have a simple relationship with the Eibush, and the Eibush is going to be their Melech. And this is the third Malach. The third Malach says to her, Hagar, I don't know how your life, your physical life is going to turn out, but it's worth it. This return is worth it. In the future, you're going to have so many kids, they're going to be uncountable. And then a fourth Malach comes. And the fourth Malach gives him much more than an incentive. The fourth Malach says, Hagar, you're going to have a son. And his name is Yishmael. You know what Yishmael means? Shama Hashem es Anyech. The Eibishter heard your Anyech, your anguish. And it's very precise. It doesn't say Shama Lakim. Shama Hashem. Shema Vaya. The Eibishter tells Hagar, your son's name is going to be Yishmael. The Eibishter heard your cry. Meaning, the Malach says to her, in the future you'll have a lot of kids, but right now, you're going to have a son who is so unique, who's so special, that first of all, his name is mentioned in the Torah. If your name is mentioned in the Torah, trust me, you're important. His name is mentioned there many times. Number two, the Eibishter himself gives him his name. And what is the meaning of the name Yishmael? Shama Hashem, the Eibishter heard her cries. So this fourth Malach, or the fifth Malach, depending on how you count, gives Hagar the ultimate incentive. He says to Hagar, it's not just that you're going to suffer now and after you're dead there's going to be reward. You are going to experience nachas during your lifetime. Because you're going to bring into this world a child that's so worthwhile that the Eibishter personally names him, and his name means that the Eibishter hears, Shama Hashem es Anyich. And this is Yishmael. Now you may or may not know, Rashi says Yishmael also tshuva. Rashi says Yishmael the tshuva. Rashi says something even more. When Avraham is 99, and the Eibishter says to Avraham Avinu, you're going to have a son from Sara, Avraham says, Lu Yishmael yichya lefanecha. Yishmael's good. And Rashi says, B'yirasecha. Rashi says Yishmael could have been a big tzaddik. So the fourth Malach doesn't only offer Hagar an incentive in saying, you'll suffer now, the reward is going to come later. The fourth Malach says to Hagar, you're going to go back home, and the reward is going to be immediately. You're going to have an extraordinary child who's going to be the father of one of the largest nations in the world. And you're going to have much nachas. And this is the reason you have to have different malachim. Because each malach is saying something with a whole different tone. One malach is comforting her. The second malach is being tough to her. The third malach is being rational with her. The fourth malach is trying to pacify her. And the fifth malach is poshet, making her feel good. You're going back to Sarah's house is going to bear immediate reward. And then he tells her about this kid. Now I have to say that I was preparing this class, and I right now you don't want to say anything nice about the Bnei Yishmael, although Arabs are not all Bnei Yishmael. We don't know which of the Arabs are actually Yishmael's descendants. There's no way all the Muslims, there's Muslims that are not even Arab, but even all the Arabs are Bnei Yishmael. They're not. Yishmael is a family of many different families of Arabs. But they all identify as B'nai Yishmael. They go to the Maras HaMachpelah. They're all Yishmael's children in name. So you don't want to, at this juncture, because of the current Ma'amid HaMatzev. But I want to tell you what Rashi says. The Torah says two things about him. Number one, Pera Adam. And number two, Yodeh Bakel. Three things. Number one, Pera Adam. He's a wild guy. You can't tame him. Can't control him. Number two, Yodeh Bakel Yad Kelba. He's had anybody's business, and everybody has their hands in his business. And number three, Vapnei Echav Yishkon. He lives amongst his family. And by the way, in later Parshas it says Vapnei Echav Yipol. He falls. So the Rashi says when Avraham Avinu was alive, he lived amongst his brothers. And when Avraham Avinu passes away, then he falls. Each one of these three ideas is interesting. The first one is Pera Adam means what? He's feral, he's wild, you can't control him. Now, if you understand the American culture, there's a good side to that, the bad side to that. You could say he was an artist, he was creative, he was outside the box, whatever you want to say. He was an animal, he was wild. He lived in a desert, he was a hunter, he was not a man of civilization, which is a chesaron. But on the other hand, there was a quality of freedom about him. He was an uncontrollable guy. But Rashi also says about Pera Adam that he manages to get everybody to hate him. He just has a chush, everybody hates him. And the Ramban says something very disturbing. The Ramban says on the words Pera Adam that because Sarah tortured him, he was given permission to torture Sarah's children. But then it says Yodeh Bakel V'Yad Kel Boy. Yodeh Bakel V'Yad Kel Boy has a few interesting pirushim. The first is a targum. My father-in-law told it to me, Olav Shalom. I wouldn't have known it otherwise. And I'm going to imagine the Rebbe would say it in Fabrengen. Yodeh Bakel means he needs everybody. V'Yad Kel Boy, and everybody needs him. My father-in-law was explaining that the idea that the Eibishter gave the Arabs the oil is Yad Kel Boy, that we need them all. If not for energy, if not for the fact that we need the energy from the Middle East, the whole politique would be different. The situation would be different. When I was a little child, we had a doctor. He was a Jewish guy. This goes back to the 1970s. His name was Weissman. He was a bitter Yid. He wasn't from. And every time my brother would come to the doctor, he would literally harass us. And we were 7, 8, 9 years old. How come God gave the oil to the Arabs? He would bother us. It got so bad that my mother changed. She couldn't let us go alone. He lived in Carrollton or Kingston. We used to go to the doctor alone. And every time, if we came with my mother, he behaved. When we went alone, 2 little boys, he would badger us. He was like angry at God. He was letting God into holy Taidanikis. Why did the Avish give the oil to the Arabs? So I heard that the Rebbe once said that they're going to find reserves in Israel, which are going to be even greater than the reserves that they found in the Gulf. And there was a while back they found not oil but natural gas in huge volumes in the Mediterranean. I don't know what's going on with that, but apparently, they're exporting it or they're excavating it. But the point is, the whole world should not be dependent on the Arabs for oil. So this is the second thing. Yodai Bakel v'Yad Kel Bei state in Targum. He needs everybody and everybody needs him. But then it says in the Ebenezer something else. Yodai Bakel touches the Ebenezer, the guy's going to make a mess in the world. First of all, the Ramban says he's always fighting at people. He's always at war with somebody. Yodai Bakel is always at war. The Ebenezer, Yodai Bakel means in the beginning he wins many battles. V'Yad Kel Bei, and he fights one battle too many, and he gets crushed and defeated and broken. So let's go back to the beginning of the birth of Islam. Muhammad was at the gates of Paris. Muhammad was at the gates of Paris. That's how powerful the Muslims were in the first generation. Europe. In that generation. We'll debate the history. You look it up. Muhammad was at the gates of Paris. Islam spread like wildfire.
They were big.
But incredibly big. And the painful thing was that they used war. Okay, I don't want to get into this because of more reasons than one. But the Ebenezer says, Yodeh Bakel V'Yad Kel Bei, he fights many, many wars, but he fights one war too many. And when he fights that last war, he gets defeated. And I'm thinking that this is the way to end this class. Yodeh Bakel v'Yad Kel Bei. Taka caused a lot of tzaddis, but Sof Kol Sof v'Yad Kel Bei. Okay, now you can ask your questions if Rabbi Zakenik will allow. Rabbi Cohen, I know your name.
You said Malach have no names.
Right.
We have like 7 Malach and that guy bringing all that.
So first of all, there's different kinds of malachim. There's a rare malachim, because their name defines their mission. But even those malachim whose mission is defined cannot do something which is outside of the nature that the Eibishter gave them. But I guess other malachim don't have a name. You're asking a very good question. The Nephilim malachim said to the Eibishter, let us go down to earth and we'll be tzaddikim. And the Eibishter says, you'll go down to earth, you'll be worse than human beings. And the malachim said, try us out. And the Eibishter tried them out. So that's what I know about the Nephilim. Go ahead, talk loud.
Hagar was a tzaddikus, right?
Hagar apparently was a big tzaddikus, yeah.
Right. So if the mom told us she would be proud of like her kids, I mean, I don't know if she would be.
She had reason to be. Yishmael did tshuva. Yishmael did tshuva. Yishmael respect. By the time he died, he had such respect for Yitzchak. And the other children also, they were good people. You see, this is the deal. It's a common cliche that's known that says the other side of genius is madness. You know what that means? The other side of genius is madness. People who are very, very smart are either brilliant or cuckoo. Avraham was a powerhouse. If Avraham's children were not Yitzchak, it was kind of hard not to be in trouble. So over generation, I mean, the Yotze met Yishmael. You know, Yishmael is considered a child of Avraham. That's not really his. In Pnimius and Yonim. But in this class, Yishmael was okay. That's how we're approaching it. When the Malach is consoling Hagar, the physical man Yishmael, who is not Esav, let's put it that way. I gave classes last year on the names of Esav's children and the names of Yishmael's children. And Yishmael's children were not on the same level as Esav's children. You had a question? Anybody else? Okay, let's start from Let's start from